After studying this module, you shall be able to know more about obsessive compulsive disorder, learn about its ICD and DSM criteria, identify the various types of obsessions and compulsions, evaluate the etiology of OCD, and also to analyze the epidemiology, gender differences and comorbidity of OCD patients in India. Obsessive compulsive disorder, abbreviated as OCD, is relatively common disorder. This is associated with distress and significant impairment in daily functioning. A wide range of potential severity is associated with OCD. Moderate symptoms are experienced by many patients with OCD, and OCD is appropriately characterized as an example of severe and persistent mental illness and is quite disabling. Diagnostically, obsessive compulsive disorder refers to the presence of undesirable and distress-producing obsessive ideas, thoughts or images, which generally are followed by compulsive behaviors adopted by the patient in order to neutralize the obsessive thoughts or images. ICD-10 criteria of OCD. OCD is in the category F40 to F48, neurotic, stress-related and somatoform disorders, and it is on axis F42. To start the procedure of diagnosis, symptoms of obsessions and or behaviors with compulsions have to be there for at minimum 2 continuous weeks and must produce distress and problems in daily life events. The various characteristics of symptoms of obsessions are: the obsessional symptoms should represent the person's personal thoughts and urges. At minimum, there should be one undesirable thought or behavior which the individual resists unsuccessfully. The presence of the thought for the performance of compulsive behavior should not lead to pleasure. Here, the simple relief of anxiety can be referred to as the pleasure. The concurrent ideas, images or urges should seem unpleasant to the person. ICD-XS 42.0 predominantly obsessional thoughts or ruminations. These may take the form of one's views, images, urges in the form of actions. They may vary with each other but are mostly reason behind the person's distress. For example, a man can get obsessed by the idea that maybe he could not resist his temptation to kill his wife, or by a weird, strange, repetitive thought. Many a times these thoughts are just fruitless, consisting of a never-ending series of vague alternatives. These futile thoughts are an important element of much other obsessional ruminations that ultimately leads to the indecisiveness for even minor decisions of everyday life. There is a close relation between obsessive disorders and obsessional ruminations. If the obsessive thoughts persist in the presence of depression, then the diagnosis of such thoughts should be avoided. ICD-XS 42.1 predominantly compulsive acts or obsessional rituals. Most of the behaviors having the property of compulsions are associated with cleaning, especially with washing hands, repeatedly checking to assure the prevention of the occurrence of a harmful event, or over-organization of things. Such obsessional rituals seek to prevent the danger or harmful situations of which the patient is continuously feared of. However, a large amount of time is generally spent in such kind of behaviors, often ending the person to sluggishness and ambiguousness. Generally, obsessional rituals related to cleanliness are more seen in women than the obsessional rituals related to sluggishness in men. Generally, thoughts having the property of obsessions are more related to depression than obsessional rituals having the property of compulsions, which are, however, more submissive to the behavior therapies. Now we discuss about the DSM-5 criteria of OCD. American Psychiatric Association initially identified obsessive compulsive disorder as an anxiety disorder, but however, today it has its own method of diagnosis with a separate chapter, Obsessive Compulsive and Related Disorders, in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition. Obsessions as defined by DSM-5 are recurrent and persistent ideas, impulses or images that are encountered by an individual leading to unsuitable and invasive disturbances that ultimately ends the individual at a significant level of anxiety and distress. The individual tries to repress these ideas, urges or images, or tries to offset them by another idea or behavior. Compulsions as defined in DSM-5. Recurrent actions like washing hands, organizing, inspecting, or mental actions like chanting, counting, iterating phrases silently, etc. are carried out to balance the obsessions. Such actions must not be the consequence of the addictive stuff or physiological disease. The action should have an aim to prevent or reduce distress or to prevent a harmful happening as perceived by the patient. However, such physical or mental action should not really prevent or counteract the event by mean to and or they should be in excess. The individual must recognize at any phase in his life during the disorder that such obsessive thoughts or compulsive behaviors are in excess or have no clear reason. A significant level of distress should be produced by such obsessive thoughts or compulsive behaviors, must consume at least more than an hour a day, and should act as an interference in individuals' daily activities, occupation, academic activities, or general social or personal relationships. Related disorders. A new chapter categorizes obsessive compulsive disorder with related disorders like body dysmorphic disorder and trichotillomania, which is a hair pulling disorder, as well as two new disorders which are hoarding disorder and excoriation or skin picking disorder. The first one we discuss is body dysmorphic disorder. Body dysmorphic disorder or BDD in DSM-5 differs from that of DSM-4 in one extra characteristic, that is recurrent physical or mental actions carried out in reaction to the preoccupation with the faults in physical image as being perceived by the patient. Then we have hoarding disorder. The description of the hoarding disorder varies as being listed as just one prodrome of OCD in DSM-4 as opposed to the diagnostic category in DSM-5. Hoarding disorder can be defined by the dogged problems in getting rid of obsessions, no matter what are the other viewpoints regarding these obsessions. And next other type we have is trichotillomania, which is hair pulling disorder. The name hair pulling disorder is being added in DSM-5. However, the other characteristics are more or less same as that in DSM-4. It can be referred to as an urge disorder leading to a compulsive impulse to pull out one's hair, ending at significant loss of hair or balding, distress and problem in daily functioning. Excoriation or skin picking disorder. DSM-5 added a new disorder in its chapter named as excoriation or skin picking disorder. Continuously and repeatedly picking one's skin leading to the scrapes in skin is the trait of this disorder. Then we have other specified and unspecified obsessive compulsive and related disorders. DSM-5 included in its chapters the other specified obsessive compulsive and related disorders. Various states may lie under this disorder like body focused repetitive behavior disorder and obsession, jealousy or unspecified obsessive compulsive and related disorders. Body focused repetitive behavior disorder can be identified by the repetitive behaviors other than hair pull or skin picking like bunching nails or lips or masticating cheeks, followed by recurrent efforts to reduce or terminate such actions. Obsession jealousy can be defined by a non-delusional preoccupation perception of the partner's infidelity. Now we must move on to epidemiology, gender differences, comorbidity of OCD in Indian patients. One Indian epidemiological study discovered a lifetime prevalence of 0.6%, and females are more likely to have compulsive behaviors related to cleansing and comorbid trichotillomania. A large number of Indian studies have indicated that tic disorder, hypochondriasis, body dysmorphic disorder and trichotillomania have comorbidity with OCD. Now we must understand the types of obsessive thoughts and compulsions. So for that we must know that following are the types of obsessive thoughts explained by Carson et al. In 2007. According to him, idea or thought having the property of obsession consisting mostly of the contamination fear, dread of hurting one's own self or other and pathological doubt. Necessity of uniformity, preoccupations related to sex and religious or aggressive obsessions. Obsessive thoughts might involve themes of violent or aggressive behavior. For example, a husband being preoccupied with the thought that he might kill his wife. Etiology of OCD. Psychodynamic viewpoint. The psychoanalytical theory offers an interesting account of both the development of OCD and the specific content of people's obsessions and compulsions. According to this theory, the reason that so many obsessions and compulsions have to do with contamination, sex and aggression is that unconscious conflicts have to do with sexual and aggressive impulses. Reasons for the development of OCD according to this viewpoint are: first reason is fixation at anal stage, which could be due to overly harsh toilet training. OCD symptoms represent the outcome of the struggle between the id and the ego, wherein id wants to let go and ego wants to control. For example, when ideas having the property of obsession like harming others trespass, the id force is dominant. Thus, OCD patients have a weak ego. Often the prodromes indicate the incomplete success of a defense mechanism. A person having fixation at the anal stage of psychosexual stages of development may, via reaction formation, prevents his impulse to soil and thus have compulsion of over neatness, cleanliness and orderliness. Other defense mechanisms include undoing and isolation. Next we have behavioristic viewpoint. Some behavioral account of obsessive ideas or compulsive behaviors as learned behaviors reinforced by some form of reinforcements. The depletion of fear can be a type of reinforcement. For example, compulsively washing one's hands can work as an operant escape response that tends to reduce one's obsession of getting impure due to dust or microorganisms. Compulsive behavior may also be directly rewarded. The compulsive behavior is attained by chance reward. Perhaps, for example, obsessive compulsive behavior draws regard and love from the partner who may serve the concern of the entire patient. One dominant view of OCD derived from O.H. Mauer's two-process theory of avoidance learning. According to the two-process theory of avoidance learning, a neutral stimulus may get combined with a fear-provoking idea or experience by classical conditioning, ultimately ending the person to anxiety. Next perspective we have is evolutionary viewpoint. The evolutionary perspective suggests that it is the roots of evolution that underlie a preoccupation with the dust or impurity or certain any other type of obsessions. In addition, some theorists have argued that the displacement activities that many species of animals engage in under situations of conflict or high arousal resemble the compulsive rituals seen in obsessive compulsive disorder. Displacement activities often involve grooming, such as bird preening his feather or nesting under conditions of high conflict or frustration. Thus, one may conclude that obsessive behaviors like cleaning or checking found in individuals with obsessive compulsive disorder are mostly evoked by stress or obsessional ideas ending at significant level of anxiety. Next we have cognitive viewpoint. This perspective emphasizes on beliefs and assumptions which include memory deficit. People with OCD has a significant lower level of self-concept about their skills to memorize. That may be the reason to the recurrence of their ritualistic behaviors. Effect of attempting to suppress obsessive thoughts. People with OCD may try to actively suppress these unwanted or intrusive thoughts, but this may lead to their experiencing a paradoxical increase in those thoughts. Then, another cognitive deviance that they have is appraisals of responsibility for intrusive thoughts. People with OCD often seem to have an escalated perception of their duties. In turn, this inflated sense of one's duties can in some vulnerable people be linked with beliefs that having an idea about doing something is equivalent to actually doing it. This is known as thought-action fusion. This motivates compulsive behavior to try to reduce the likelihood of any harmful happening. Next we have biological perspective. Findings from at least half a dozen studies using PET scan have found that individuals with preoccupied thoughts and compulsive behaviors had unusually active metabolic levels of caudate nucleus, the orbital frontal cortex and the cingulate cortex. There is also a dysfunction of the cortico-basal ganglionic thalamic circuit, which leads to inappropriate behavioral responses. Some latest studies have found that higher level of activities of serotonin or higher sensitivity of certain parts of brain to serotonin is correlated to symptoms of OCD. Some of the twin studies also suggest an excessive concurrence rate of monozygotic twins than that of zygotic twins. Most family studies have also found substantially higher rates of OCD in first degree relatives of OCD patients. Before we move on, we must know the demographic of the OCD in children and adolescents. It says that males are more prone to obsessive compulsive disorder than females according to the various Indian studies being conducted on children and adolescents. Thus, it justifies that the prevalence of OCD is higher in males as reported by the earlier carried out clinical studies of young OCD, proving the findings of the gender distribution of OCD is developmentally sensitive. Now we must also understand the phenomenology of OCD. Studies found that obsessions had a lower frequency in comparison to compulsive behavior. Obsessional thoughts common at the time were of hurting, doctrine or neutral images. Cleaning, chanting mantras, touching, counting and expectorating were one of the most common compulsive behaviors. Many studies found that obsessions related to impurity were most common of all, around 62%. They also found the rate of commonality in aggressive preoccupations being 57%, uniformity being 34%, sexual relations 22%, doctrine being 22%, bodily compulsions or obsessions being 12% and hoarding in 7%. In reference to compulsive behavior, cleansing was the most common, escalating up to 69%, dogged by recurrence being 52%, inspecting including 47%, organizing being 29%, counting mounting to 15% and hoarding being just 7%. Other forms of obsessive and compulsive thoughts and behaviors were present in 65% and 47% of the sample respectively. Now we must understand the comorbidity. Psychical comorbidity is found to be prevalent in people with OCD. Various researches on young OCD has found higher rate of comorbid major depressive disorder being 10 to 73%, anxiety disorders being 26 to 76% and tic disorder being 17 to 59%. Various Indian studies have explored the comorbidity in young having OCD and they found that the rates of comorbid major depressive disorder, dysthymic depression and bipolar disorder have ranged from 14 to 23%, 0 to 2% and 0 to 2% respectively. Among anxiety disorders, the rate of panic disorder, social phobias, specific phobias, over-anxious disorder and separation anxiety disorder ranges from 0 to 6%, 0 to 13%, 5 to 7%, 0 to 7% and 5 to 7% respectively. Summary: person with OCD experiences obsessive and intrusive thoughts which lead to compulsive behavior, and every time the person performs compulsive ritual, his or her anxiety decreases. There is an emphasis on biological point of view and more researches are coming up to explain the biological causal factors of OCD, and there are a number of genetic studies, studies of brain functioning and other psychopharmacological studies. In the Indian context, more studies are needed to understand the epidemiology, course and outcome of the disease.